Hi everyone, I'm Adrian and I'm here to share with you the best tips and tools to help you improve your own landscape photography. I'm here in the beautiful Australian rainforest today and I've set myself a challenge to shoot with just a fixed focal length on a prime lens. Specifically, I'm looking at shooting with the Sony 85mm f1.4. The 85mm lens that I purchased, I've used predominantly for headshots, portraits, mucking around with my kids in the backyard or if we're out on a family vacation, but I haven't actually ever used it for forest or landscape photography. So let's talk about what I'm going to cover off today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenge. I'm going to talk you through some of the sort of photographs you can expect from an 85mm lens. I'll talk you through the Sony 85mm 1.4 G Master and a little bit of my thoughts around that particular lens itself. And then we're going to talk through some of the constraints, things you need to consider when shooting with an 85mm lens as well. So with that in mind, let's head to the forest behind me and let's have a look at our first photograph. So I really want to push myself out of my comfort zone today and challenge you all as well around actually looking at other ways to capture forest and woodlands. So traditionally I've been using my 24 to 105 and focusing on those focal lengths between say 40 and 80mm and really comfortable in that zone essentially. So today I brought out my 85 prime to really give it a workout because I rarely use it. I've bought it for things like headshots and portraits, as I said earlier on. But now the opportunity to come out here in field and really try to make the most of this fantastic lens. All right, let's give it a go. So I've photographed this tree a number of times, at least two trees. They're beech myrtle trees here in the cool temperate rainforest of Southeast Australia. What I'm trying to do here is using the 85mm lens to really compose a more intimate scene. So the photographs I've taken previously, I've tried to really get their presence in the photograph as like they're two, I think I've talked about it previously, two opposing sisters. So thinking of my daughters. Because the trees are actually branching off in each direction. So I'll show you that in a moment. But first things first, I've set my white balance. So it's quite cool here. It's actually very cold. It snowed over the weekend, so there's a little bit of snow left on the ground around me. It's probably only about 1 degree. And so I've set my white balance quite on the cool side. So I've set Kelvin at 4,800. So on the cooler side, so you know you can adjust this in Lightroom and post-processing, but at least this way I get a fairly true accurate of how I feel. Now it's probably maybe even a tad too blue now look at it, so I might adjust that slightly up to 5.1 potentially. In terms of exposures, as I said, it's quite, even though it may look quite light on the video, it's actually quite dark in here. So I'm currently sitting at f8. So I know this lens is actually very sharp at f1.4, which I'll do in a few images shortly as well. But I also know f8 to f11 certainly is a sweet spot for a lens and certainly for landscape to get things front to back in sharpness. So f8, 1/6 of a second, ISO 1250, and we've got a lot of fog in the background as well, low cloud coming through, so adding really mystical things. So I'll show you what I framed up on the screen now for the first shot. So as I said before, so you can see this log over here coming in from the bottom of the scene. We've got some ferns, lush green ferns on the bottom here. We have that sapling just here coming in, and as I said, we've got the two beech myrtle branches coming off and sort of balancing that. And then if you look through into the scene, given we're at f8, we're going to be sharp all the way through in this example. Through and sort of drop off behind the two beech myrtles, which are in the background here. So those are the two main subjects of the tree here. So I've turned on manual focus, so I've got the manual focus peaking on, showing that everything is in focus, and I've just taken a test image to check. And we've got the 5-second timer on. We're just going to wait for the wind to blow through. Well, actually, maybe we're okay. We're at a very slow shutter speed, so just want to make sure. Let's have a quick look at that. Looking great. And so I'm also looking for motion blur at this point in time because there's a slight wind. Look how sharp that is. So that's the 85mm f.14 at f8.
So looking at the image when I got home, I noticed that the log in the right-hand corner of the frame was quite heavy. I've done a poor job of creating depth in the image by not being able to separate the trees in the far background behind the two beech myrtles, and overall a bit disappointed with the image. All part of the experience, that's why I love photography, never stop learning. Let's get back to the video.
I will now try a shot at the lowest aperture, which is f.14. So my intent here is to try and blur the foreground, so the leaves, possibly even that log coming in from the left-hand side, and just see what that looks like. So at a wide scene like this, it'll be interesting to see sort of the shallower depth of field we're getting, whether that look appeals not. So let's take that shot now. So one of the first advantages of dropping the aperture back to f1.4 and really opening up the lens is we can drop the ISO back. So I've dropped the ISO back to the expandable ISO on this camera, which is the Sony A7 III. So we're in an ISO 50. Shutter speeds increased, so now 1/13 of a second, and f1.4. Okay, so as you can see here, so slightly underexposed it, but ISO 50, f1.4, 13 seconds. You can see here how sharp, hopefully you can see on the camera, how sharp the foreground is. Those ferns, the log, the beech myrtle here, and then it drops off behind. So you can see there's a bit of a beautiful shallow depth of field through to the two main beech myrtles that have subjects in the background. So we might do two shots. So we might do one with the foreground in focus and then blur it for the second shot. So let's try that first. So I'll leave the settings as they are. So just switch back to manual focus, make sure we're still in focus on the foreground. As you can see there, fantastic, we are. So let's take that shot now. Okay, so I've changed the focus point, so manually focus it now on the two beech myrtles at the back there, so you can see they're in sharp focus, and we can see we're losing some of the foreground here, so I don't think this is going to win any awards, this photograph, because it's not really balanced now that it's blurred, but anyway, I'll take the shot anyway, so you can have a look at what it looks like. Final thoughts, but before I do so, I thought I'd pass the question off over to you. What's your favourite focal length in landscape photography? If you have an 85mm prime in the back of the cupboard, or even a nifty 50, are you willing to give it a go in landscape photography? Let me know in the comments below. If you're getting value out of this video, really appreciate a like. Thank you so much. So perhaps you don't own an 85mm or you own a crop sensor camera. So if you put an 85mm lens, full frame lens, onto a crop sensor, it's going to end up at about 127mm. So you've got to remember the science behind it. So 1.5 times the focal length will give you the actual focal length on a crop sensor. So if you're keen to get the 85mm lock on a crop sensor, all you need is about a 50mm, 56mm lens as well, and pop it on the front of the camera and you get the 85mm effect. If you think about it, the lens is just a tool to help you express your own creativity. So whether it's wide at 24, 16mm, 14mm, or up at the 85mm as we have been today, it's really about expressing yourself and telling the stories that you want to tell in the focal length that you're comfortable with.
If you enjoy forest and woodland photography, the next video I'd recommend you watch is the one I've done recently on a circular polarizer and how to increase colour saturation and get richer colours in your photographs. Stick around for next week's video as I'll share part 2 of my 85mm challenge and how some of the constraints of a fixed focal length really tested me. You won't want to miss it.